Welcome. In this workshop, we're going to discuss motivation and employee engagement, especially that of your key staff, your high leverage staff, and the operational risk implications of unmotivated and disengaged human capital, especially those higher level managers and high leverage staff. As our slide suggests here, it illustrates that intrinsically motivated behavior is perpetual and self-sustaining. The benefits of intrinsic motivation is that key employees and high leverage staff who achieve this level of motivation are much more likely to accept agency of their position with the organization rather than just seeing their work as a job. It becomes more of who they are rather than just what they do. That agency, that proactive agency, reduces the likelihood of this person becoming an operational risk threat just due to disengagement, unmotivation, having a disincentivized person in the workplace. And in fact, they will become more incentivized to look out for the welfare of the enterprise within their scope of responsibility. But this must be intentionally managed. This has to be a purposeful effort in some regard. This is not necessarily going to just happen by accident, again, especially for those very key staff and high leverage staff. On the other hand, the extrinsic reward system, money, perks, fear of failure, and even recognition and status, feeling like the boss likes me, that value system reduces intrinsically motivated behavior because intrinsic motivation satisfies the need for autonomy and control, where the extrinsic reward system takes that away. With the intrinsic motivation reward system, we attribute our behavior to the reward, which only lasts as long as the arbitrary value of that reward lasts. Which is, of course, different for different people, and therefore is an unknown, uncontrollable risk factor. We don't know how any one particular employee is going to respond to an intrinsic reward or what their arbitrary value is assigned to that reward and how effective it will be and for how long. So these are our potential risk factors. So now that we have a better understanding of what drives us as professionals with the driver's professional behavior model, then we can go into motivation and look how we can intentionally work to motivate those key people. The act or the need to motivate and to engage those folks can be quite a burden and a time suck for middle and higher management people. Those of you who may own some type of a watercraft, if you have a sailboat, a pleasure boat, or know someone who does, I'm sure you can relate. That's often regarded as, or probably more likely from the mouth of a significant other, you may hear that boat is that's that black hole in the water where all your money goes. And it can be very similar in the workplace, in pursuit of enterprise, to the extent that there's a lot of effort, or potentially a lot of effort, in engaging and continually motivating those key staff and high leverage staff, basically to do their job, because the success of the enterprise is dependent upon that. The less we can focus on that, or need to focus on that, either intentionally or just by way of how business is done, obviously the more effective and cost effective, certainly, the staff management can be and will be. But again, that has to be intentional. That continual effort to motivate and incentivize, much like your boat, your black hole in the water, Can be that black hole in the budget, that black hole in the time control plan. Where'd the money go? Where did that time go? Why aren't we on schedule? And this can be a lot of it. So how do we prevent that? How do we motivate and get our key staff to the point where they are inherently incentivized to operate, to do their job? Well, our first slide here, actually it's our second slide, I guess, shows level 1 intrinsic motivation. And it's no accident that triangle there is yellow. That signifies caution. Because this level of motivation, although important and necessary to get to higher levels, may not create enough inertia on its own for this person to accelerate into higher levels of motivation, to that perpetual level of motivation. But even for this level, what do we need? What do we need to start with? Well, our first component here is clarity. So the expectations of this person, of this key staff person, need to be clear. And that's clarity in the perception of that key staff person. As we learned with the drivers of professional behavior model, that perception is blocking reality, unless it is reality, and then we're great. We have stasis or close to it. And that's what we want to get to. So we can't just assume that the expectations are clear to this key staff people without making sure. So again, this is something that potentially needs to be intentionally managed. Secondly, it needs to be realistic. So it can be clear, but not necessarily realistic. And to use an example, if I take you back into my world of expeditionary leadership, if my objective as the guide is to summit a mountain with my clients, that's a pretty clear objective. Like, I can understand I'm supposed to get my clients to the top of that mountain. However, if that mountain is, let's say, 18,000 feet, and maybe we're base camped at 10 or 12,000 feet, it is not realistic that I can get my clients there in 2 hours. That's an unrealistic goal, even though the expectation is clear. The converse of this is that it needs to be realistic in the real world. So it is realistic that I could get my clients there in 6 hours. So even if it is realistic in the real world, but that key staff person cannot understand that it's realistic or accept that it's realistic, then that may need further coaching or further development of that person to understand how this is a realistic goal. So that's another level of management that might be necessary to get them to that point. If this person can never see that this is a realistic expectation, then you may need to look at, are they appropriate for that level of responsibility that they have? And then the third component there is usefulness. It needs to be useful, of course, to this key staff person. And that usefulness might actually clash with the objective of the organization. Especially in what I've found working with clients for the past few years, is that in the current marketplace, the young, educated workforce they're in demand. It's a seller's market. So you'll find that these candidates, or even people within your own enterprise, may be jumping from opportunity to opportunity because they can. And that's no longer really looked upon in a negative light the way it may have been 10 years ago, when everybody was expected to work at the same place for 40 years and retire. So how do you make your opportunity at your enterprise for those high leverage people that you may already have in-house or potential candidates from outside? How do you make it useful to them? Well, it may be, just to be pragmatic, in some cases, it may be framing their opportunity or potential opportunity with you or your client's enterprise as that stepping stone to that next level they want to get to, or to another opportunity. So working with that potential candidate, or those in-house staff to really see how this opportunity is useful to them. And to the extent that it doesn't clash with, or it doesn't take away from in any real way the objective, and it doesn't threaten the company mission, it doesn't negatively impact the company in any regard, other than it would anyway. If they're going to go, they're going to go. So how do you incentivize them and motivate them and engage them while they're with you? So that may be something that you need to intentionally explore within your particular workforce. I just wanted to share, recently read a white paper by some workplace behavioral scientists and analysts that was shared with EAB, which is an educational consulting firm. And it states that more than 9 out of 10 U.S. employees are willing to trade a percentage of their salary for meaningful work. To do this, to operate this study, they surveyed 2,285 professionals across 26 industries and across a range of pay levels, company size, and demographics. So it sounds like a pretty comprehensive model that they used. The analysts found that, and this is in quotes, across age and salary groups, workers want meaningful work badly enough that they are willing to pay for it. Even more surveyed employees said that, on average, they would be willing to forego 23% of their entire lifetime earnings for work that they found meaningful. These results echo the findings of their separate survey for the Conference for Women, which the analysts wrote for the Harvard Business Review. In that survey, 80% of respondents said that they would rather have a boss who cared about them finding meaning in their work than a 20% pay increase. So you can see how important that is to the modern workforce, to have meaning and usefulness in their work, in the professional pursuit with your enterprise. So once we've satisfied those three components and we've got that level one motivation going, hopefully we've created the inertia to move toward, or want to move toward, higher levels of engagement. So level 2 motivation then is that next triangle that we'll look at. This is in green, signifying that it's a safe level of motivation, and that these people are perpetually and in a self-sustaining manner are motivated to accept and pursue agency of you or your client's enterprise, within their appropriate level of responsibility. The first one, and you'll find this is a running theme, we're going to see this quite a bit throughout this series, anytime we talk about the human equation side of operational risk management, is that belonging piece that we talked about with the drivers of professional behavior model. We all, again, seem to want to belong. That is a strong driver of behavior. So anytime that you can help those key staff be part of successes with others, and even failures with others, which, again, if intentionally managed, can be a pretty strong experience that can be gleaned from to make this person even more incentivized. So anytime that you can purposely create an opportunity for this high leverage person to be part of something that may not have otherwise been able to be achieved, or at least achieved to the same level of success without them, is important. That should be part of intentional management of high leverage staff. The next one is autonomy, which you'll find, again, to correlate with the drivers of professional behavior model as a primary driver of behavior. So what's it look like in the workplace? Well, your high leverage people, your key staff, they have a scope of responsibility. They have, or should have, and maybe that's where you start, making sure that they have a very clear, understood definition of their role, a job description or what have you. But once that is clearly spelled out and accepted and understood by all parties, give that person the autonomy to operate within that scope. And there may be fail points, there probably will be. But those can be intentionally managed as teachable moments to help this person learn from that failure and get better at what they are in that position to do. And of course, there should be successes as well, which also should be intentionally recognized. When we talk about mastery in a minute here, that's going to be important as well. But that ability to operate autonomously without being micromanaged, without feeling that they're under a microscope and the boss is ready to pounce or to question and challenge them at every turn, is going to take away that autonomy and take away that motivation. So the last one is mastery. Well, before I move into that, actually, I'm sorry for the segue, but there's a clothing company called Patagonia, which I would assume many of you have heard of. The CEO of the company, his name is Yvon Chouinard, and he wrote a book called Let My People Go Surfing. And in that book, he states that as far as scheduling and responsibility and so forth within his organization, within his company, he expects that his employees are, on days when it's good surf conditions, they're surfing. That's the title. And on days when there's been a fresh snowfall in the mountains, they are skiing if they want to be, and so forth. And so, of course, the question arises, how can you run an enterprise with that kind of what seemingly looks like a lax management philosophy? And his response is, would you want to lose a job that allowed that much autonomy and that much freedom? And, of course, who would? So that autonomy in itself and that freedom itself is what drives these people to do their jobs. I mean, of course, they are going to need to operate within the schedule of other people who they need to interact with to get their job done. But otherwise, it's kind of up to them, when and how they work. Now, of course, that's not going to work for every business model, or even within his own business model on at every level. I mean, he's talking about his management and design folks. And the other side of his business is, of course, the production of those products. And those production workers are certainly on a shift work, 9 to 5 or whatever it might be. You cannot run a production company without knowing how much bandwidth of human capital you have at any given time to create X amount of product on the other end. So again, it doesn't work across all sectors, but it's just something to think about, and it's an interesting example. But the mastery piece, again, is that feeling of accomplishment. Pretty much everybody, especially once they get into those higher levels of management and responsibility, have determined that whatever type of work they're doing and for whatever type of company they're working for is what they want to do. It's their life's work. And they want to feel a sense of mastery of this thing that they've chosen to do, and that's important for them. So again, intentionally creating opportunities and recognizing opportunities where these folks have mastered some element of their responsibility and using that as a jumping off point or stepping stone into potential higher level opportunities, or just recognition for the sake of recognition. That's always important to help that person, first of all, experience mastery and achievement, and then secondly, to recognize it, so that it is instilled within that person that they are achieving and they are accomplishing mastery of this life, of their life's pursuit. If we can achieve those three components of level 2 intrinsic motivation, you have someone who is perpetually and in a self-sustaining manner motivated within their scope of work at your organization. They are proactively and inherently accepting and even seeking agency of your enterprise. They are intrinsically managing operational risk because they're engaged enough to do so. The converse, of course, is that those disincentivized, unmotivated, disengaged staff are potentially actual risk factors in your enterprise.